this resolution or the agreement itself is to provide an ability for CHFA to engage in an alternative product for its single-family program. The purpose is, there are 3 or 4 major purposes why we are looking into this. One is to take advantage of alternative execution that may be more favorable than bonds. Number 2, we want to reduce our reliance on tax-exempt bonds so that the tax-exempt cap can be utilized by multifamily. Number 3, it can also be used to hedge against interest rate risks. And number 4, it is a fast execution and it will provide better liquidity management. So with that, I will open it up and will be happy to answer any questions about the MSFDA. This agreement, or I should say that the concept, it should be very familiar to Tim, or if the commissioner jumps on, because this is something that banks do utilize when they engage in the TBA market.
Wouldn't you say it's also something many other HFAs do as well, right? It's not.
That's correct.
Do I have?
Hasim, I just want to acknowledge that I'm on.
And thank you, Commissioner.
I mean, we talked about this at our last board meeting. I think it's a great idea, and clearly want to equip the authority to have the ability to do this. We'll have a separate resolution, I presume, when we're ready to transact, correct?
No. So what happens is this allows us to engage and enter into an agreement. But once we have that approval, what will happen is, as we pool and we have a pipeline of single-family loans, we would then determine if those loans would be better suited if it gets funded long-term using tax-exempt bonds, or if we feel it's necessary because of, again, we have the volume cap issue, the present value calculation. If it's well suited to go under the TBA route, then we'll just do the switch. So everything is more like it's automatic.
Well, effectively, the resolution gives you the ability to do the master agreement, and then under staff discretion to execute if that's more efficient funding with this resolution.
Correct. It's similar to when we evaluate should we issue bonds. So the board approves provides us with the authority to issue bonds, and then depending to the market environment, depending to production, depending to where we are at the time, then we will decide it would be beneficial for CHFA to issue the bonds. And then when we issue the bonds, whether we are issuing more fixed rate versus variable rate, those type of things.
I apologize for not reading the resolution closer, but it is both your authority and Nandini's authority?
Yes. So it's a delegated authority, and then what will happen is the execution will be no different than, everything will tie back where when we engage in this environment, we still will be utilizing our financial advisor with our counsel to ensure that we are getting the necessary protection and the best execution.
Okay, thank you.
Hasim, this is George. In general, I don't have a problem with the concept, but I have some concerns about the memo and the summary. And the memo from you to the Finance Committee that says, I'm going to skip the first sentence. Actually, this part of the first sentence. It says a single family bond issuer like CHFA has traditionally relied on the issuance of tax-exempt bonds to provide the funding for its first-time home buyer. Was correct. I should have skipped the first sentence. The second sentence, in connection with the capital study and the need to relieve the pressure on its bond volume, it is necessary for CHFA to consider a forward delivery. Is it really a necessary, or is it being recommended? Because then later on in your memo, you say, it merely provides an ability to pursue it if such execution provides and satisfies CHFA financing objectives. So one sentence you say it gives us the ability, and the other one says it's necessary. The word necessary to me has a much higher significance than is an option. I know we're talking about potato versus potato, but
I understand where you're coming from, Commissioner. So when it comes to the word necessary, what I'm trying to say here is relying back to the prior sentence. There's always been significant pressure on our the need to manage our tax-exempt bond value cap. And in the past, we've always been, I wouldn't say lucky, but things were in our favor. We get carry forward from the state. We have sufficient recycling.
Look, I understand the need. I understand the reason why we want the option.
Okay.
The word necessary, it tells me there's some pressure going on, and this is the only option we have. And we have some sort of crisis because it's necessary. I mean, we must do this, right?
Okay.
So, really, my question is there something else going on then?
There's nothing.
I mean, but the use of that word, and then your last sentence being contradictory to that sentence, because your last one says, we don't have to do it. That's an option, and that's my point.
Okay. So we're just trying to. How about this? Like,
and not to tell you what to put in your memo, but words have meaning, right? Especially for somebody like me.
Understood. I know where you're coming from.
I read it a little bit differently. I don't have it in front of me now, but the way that I read it is it's necessary for us to do something, not continue the status quo, and that this is one of the options that we could use. So the necessary wasn't specific to this actual issue, but it is necessary for us to do something different. But I mean, again, to George's point, I mean, I don't think it necessarily is a bad thing to change a word. I don't think it's 6 in one and half a dozen in the other as far as I'm concerned.
And I would normally agree with you on that, except that we're talking about numbers, we're talking about financing, right? So, look, I've been in enough situations where people, you get called in front of a judge or some other authority and says, there were red flags, you didn't catch it, what, right? So that's what I'm saying. There's something here that you should go into more detail, or there's simply use of a word that we could have used a different word, but nothing else is going on.
But would the word desirable be a better word, Commissioner, do you think?
Yeah,
if Hazim
desirable, recommended,
That's fine with me.
And not because I want to change the word, I just want to know, because by reading that, look, you gotta understand what I do for a living, right? And the fact that I'm an accountant, right, which makes me very anal when it comes to reading contracts, right, or memos, right? I take it very literal, right? So it doesn't make it right or wrong. There's a reason why the legislator and his wisdom, whenever they make this decision, wanted people like me sitting in this board, right?
Okay, so we'll change the word to ensure that we are clear in terms of what we're trying to present.
You don't have to change the word. It's your memo. The record reflect that we had a discussion and
right. And I'm trying to be on record to answer your question, Commissioner, that there's nothing troubling going on, and the intent is just trying to have another execution or another pipe, another vehicle.
which I think is a great idea. It's great to have options, right? Because nobody has a crystal ball. And if we did, none of us would be here. We'd all be very rich, in our own island. If we could figure out how to market and the rates are going to behave 100%. Thank you for enduring my my concern.
Sure. And again, the whole intent of we having this discussion is to make sure that we are clear in our intent as staff, and we convey the best we can. And if there's any miscommunication, we do want to address it upfront versus all of a sudden somebody says, well, you didn't say the right thing or whatever it is.
And again, I'm not questioning your motives or anything like that. I mean, I have respect for you and your staff, and I understand the concept. Like you say, this is something that happens quite common in more sophisticated financing. So.
Good. Do I have a motion for the resolution?
I'll move it to 10.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Hi, this is Kathy. Are there any downsides or risks that we should be aware of in doing this?
So if you look at the words itself, when it comes to the agreement, this is a forward transaction agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest risk in this type of an execution is if the entity cannot deliver. So if you enter into an agreement and you essentially promise the counterparty that you are going to sell securities at a certain amount, at a certain rate, by a certain date, and if you don't deliver, there's a breakage fee. So that's the biggest risk. But then at the same time, when the other stuff is more just whether it's a good execution or a bad execution. But in terms of the biggest risk is a forward delivery.
Okay. And that seems unlikely.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question. I know with these TBA programs, some HFAs manage them in-house and some have a partner, an external partner that manages it. Will CHFA planning to use an external partner or do the program?
We most likely will engage an outside partner if we want to do this because, and again, not to say that we are not capable, but because this is something new, it's always the best way to approach something new is to seek professional assistance to build up that bench strength before you transition over and do it in-house.
Okay, so now we're going to take any more discussion? We're going to take a vote, but do we need to do it by roll call, Amy?
Yes, we do need to do a roll call for the vote.
Okay.
Amy, can you run it quickly?
Absolutely. Jerry Abrahams,
Yes.
Tim Hodges,
Yes.
Kathy McKinnon,
Yes.
George Perez,
Yes.
Sarah Sanders,
Yes.
Gwendolyn Thames. Is Glenn on the call? No. Okay. It's unanimous for those who are present.
Thank you.
All the other items are reports, but I just have a question, Hazim, on the agenda. I see we're not discussing the proposed budget. It's going to be at the full board meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's what's going to happen at the full board is I'm just going to provide an overview of the 2021. We're not going to seek any votes. This is just trying to provide a preview of it.
I'll vote on that today at the full board. That's good to know. Okay, so the next report is the 2020 Series D bond issue. Hazim, what is the...
Okay. Last month, as the committee was aware, along with the full board, we did provide and inform about the authority's intent to issue its first sustainability bonds. So back on October 8, we did release the POS. for the multifamily issuance 2020 Series D. The sale was led by Morgan Stanley. It suffice to say, it was a successful sale. We did compete directly with two HFAs that were in the market around the same time. So I think we have Jeff Prue. Jeff, are you on?
Yes, I'm on, Hazim.
Okay.
And you?
So Jeff is going to provide some color in terms of what happened, how we went in, why we did what we did. So Jeff.
Great, and good morning, everybody. Just wanted to say, first of all, we always love working with CHFA and its staff to bring bonds to the market. And this one in particular, we were very happy to be a partner with you all on because of its inaugural status as a sustainability bond program for CHFA. And I'll get into what the benefit of that was, but it's in the context of the ongoing movement of ESG and socially responsible investment. And there's a growing need for it and a growing desire of investors to buy bonds with labels like sustainability bonds. So the overall transaction was the 2020 Series D bonds, which was composed of four subseries. The fourth subseries, the D4s, was a taxable bond for replacement refunding for single family volume cap. So sort of not really part of the overall transaction, done here to give us more flexibility going forward with maintaining volume cap. That had a maturity in 2021, so a short duration taxable 30 million. Net that out of the total proceeds of 149 million, you get down to what funded the multifamily program. It's 119 million, then divided into subseries D1, D2, and D3. There was an economic refunding component in the transaction. Part of the proceeds of D1 in the amount of 12 million was part of that refunding, and then all of the D2 bonds in the amount of 20 million, and they had a tax status of AMT, and that's why it was a separate series, refunded old bonds. And so the coupons on the outstanding bonds that were refunded were 3 3/8 to 5 1/4. So weighted average coupon of just below 5% at a 4.9%. The coupons on the refunding bonds ranged from 35 basis points to 250, so generated excellent savings for the authority. The new money proceeds divided into two components as per usual. The D3s was the construction piece, and that was in the amount of 60 million. That provided funds for 8 projects and for construction, and it's a standard CHFA style bond for construction purposes, which is a long dated bond. 2060 was the maturity, set up as a put. So the mandatory tender is 2023 with lots of optionality. The optional call date begins in May of next year, 2021. Provides a lot of room for CHFA to redeem those bonds as we're going through the construction period. The permanent financing was then funded out of D1 in the amount of 28 million for the permanent loans, and that was for permanent loans for 5 projects. This had term bonds with coupons of 2 1/8 to 285. The overall financing was at a really good time in the market. We were very pleased with how it was received both from retail and from institutional investors. You can see some of these statistics on the page that's on the screen right now in the summary. But the things to really point out here was retail interest was strong. And the really interesting point on the retail interest is that it was almost all from direct retail from small mom and pop type investors, as opposed to professional retail and separately managed accounts. We liked what we saw across the serial range on the retail production, and there was also retail on the terms too. Institutionally is where we saw a significant return on how we set up this transaction and the sustainability bonds designation. As mentioned, we had 8 projects that were funded here. And in the disclosure, as we talked about at the last board meeting, we incorporated all of the relevant information associated with each of the individual projects that are being funded for construction and permanent loans. The funding here was then listed by project, where the projects are located, whether they have LIHTC in the projects, they all do, and what the income bands are for set-asides. Also, all of the energy efficiency standards are listed as well. What happened in the transaction is that as a result of this disclosure, and including for the very first time, the specific projects that are being funded with these proceeds, we got a large CRA order for the 3 furthest out term bonds. So the term bonds in, here where we are, let me just bear with me for 1 second. The terms in 2060, 55, and 50 all had a CRA order that came in for the full amount, and then a large insurance company came in as well. That resulted in, as you can see on the page, a reduction in 5 basis points between when we went out with initial pricing and in the institutional pricing. This transaction was priced over 2 days, retail on Wednesday and institutional on Thursday during the week of Columbus Day. And that approach worked out really nicely because there has been, I think most of you know, there's been a significant amount of activity in the municipal market. So it allowed investors sufficient time to get through their reviews. And because of the new disclosure and the new sustainability bonds designation, it really bore fruit here. So where it also is a super nice thing to point out, in addition to the reduction in yields and the overall rates, which will be very helpful for the program, you know, the term bond rates here were 2 1/8 to 285. That's for maturities all the way out to 2060. So to the benefit of the underwriting cost for the projects that are being financed. When stacked up against 2 marquee issuers in the multifamily bond space, New York State HFA, which attracts always a good reception in the marketplace, CHFA priced 10 to 25 basis points better than the New York State HFA bonds, which is attributable to a lower rating for a New York State HFA at AA2 versus CHFA's AAA. But the differential here in the 10 to 25 basis point improvement to CHFA is not fully packed in to that rating differential. I think it speaks to the overall quality of what was being offered here and the sustainability bonds designation and the way we're now disclosing the details about the multifamily loans being funded. Super helpful. So with that, I just would like to say again that at Morgan Stanley, we very much appreciate our partnership with CHFA, and if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer them.
Well, this is George. It's more of a statement. I mean, I think this is great. It was a nice job by everybody. But I mean, what's going on in the market right now and the concern that particularly the equities have around COVID, I would think that would help because I would think bonds are doing better.
Right, and there have been positive inflows into the muni market now for a number of weeks, and I think that also speaks to the performance that we saw on this transaction from the retail investors. Retail has been a little skittish this year, but I attribute the strong performance from individual retail to that very specific viewpoint, Commissioner, because this is viewed as a very safe security and an excellent value.
Right, and also, I mean, New York is having some issues with population and other stuff. I mean, I don't want to take away from the great work people did, but you know, I also want to, you know, fully understand that, you know, some of it was stuff that was not really in our control per se too.
Sure, and your point on that is well taken, and it brings up what we're seeing in the marketplace generally.
And that's what I'm seeing in the marketplace too from the bank side. Yep.
Regionally, there is some softness, and CHFA did benefit from that versus New York State HFA. The other point with New York State HFA is that they had kind of flooded the market with their paper. They had done 3 bond transactions in very close proximity to one another. So they had priced about 600 million of multifamily bonds over those 3 consecutive transactions that were within a month in total of the different types of pricing. So that was part of it. You also
I'm not surprised because both of those states are having difficulty with the budgets.
Yeah,
much more than we are. And they don't have the rainy day fund that we do.
Yep, that's exactly right. And the performance on the term bonds with the CRA order and then also the insurance company that came in, the insurance company that purchased the bonds is sensitive to that point, and that also benefited CHFA because they were willing to take the bonds even though we reduced the yields by 5 basis points.
The next item is, unless there's any questions for Jeff? The next
Thanks,
item.
everybody.
Yeah. Financial reports, Allison Murphy.
Good morning. Before you are the September monthly financial reports. Mortgage loan and investment interest revenue are coming in $9.3 million below budget for the 9 months ended September 30th. And $9.7 million lower than prior year. Revenue shortfalls continue to be the result of a decrease in our single-family production and increase in loan prepayments. Originations are down by $159 million and prepayments are up by $85 million compared to the same time last year. The net effect of the two results in a portfolio reduction of $200 million. Investment interest revenue shortfalls continue to be driven by the decrease in the rates of the authority short-term investments. The average stiff rate is 1.5% lower than last year. On the expense side, bond interest expense is below budget by $12.4 million and is $5.4 million lower than prior year. Administrative expenses are coming in $4.9 million under budget and $1.4 million less than prior year. When you exclude the salaries and the bennies of $18.5 million, our current year-to-date expenses are $1.1 million lower than prior years. So salaries and bennies account for 28% of our admin cost savings. Right now, the authority has about 13 vacant positions. Our staff development costs are currently down due to COVID. Foreclosure expenses are significantly under budget. The number of loans in our REO portfolio is down. And counseling fees are also under budget due to COVID. Those are some of the bigger items. Are there any questions?
If there's no questions for Allison, the next report is Delinquency and Forbearance. John Chilson.
Good morning. For the month of September, the authority purchased 128 loans totaling $25 million, of which 108 loans totaling $20.4 million were securitized, or 84.4% of our production. Remaining 20 loans for a balance of $4.6 million were whole loans. The average loan balance for September was $195,200. The September month-end mortgage-backed security balance was $2.42 billion, a decrease of $9.9 million month over month. The whole loan portfolio through August declined by 95 loans, or $13.3 million net, with a total portfolio balance of $1.55 billion. The overall delinquency rate month over month increased by 36 basis points to 3.06%, while the carrying balance of loans in foreclosure year over year decreased by $7.5 million to $35.8 million, while the number of loans in foreclosure decreased by 54. For the month of September, the authority also funded 49 down payment assistance loans totaling $323,000 with an average loan balance of $6,600, resulting in a percentage of 38% of our September borrowers utilized the down payment assistance program in purchasing their home. With regard to single-family loan forbearances, for the month of August, the whole loans and forbearance declined by 261 loans over the prior months to 968, comprising of $713,000 of monthly P&I payments on a UPB balance of $121 million, or basically 7% of our total whole loan portfolio. But of those 968 loans in forbearance, 39% of those borrowers did make their August monthly payment. For the month of September, the number of loans in forbearance declined again by 95 loans to 873 whole loans, comprising of $639,000 in monthly P&I payments on UPB of $110 million. And shifting to multifamily, there were five new multifamily loans closed in the month of September, bringing our total loan count up to 546 loans on a total balance of $1.24 billion. Our permanent loan delinquencies decreased by 2 loans to 7, while our construction loan delinquencies remain unchanged at 1. And our combined multifamily delinquency rate was 1.83%. And with regard to multifamily forbearances, there were no new forbearance agreements signed in September. So to date, there have been 7 agreements executed on covering 8 loans, involving $134,000 of monthly P&I payments on a loan balance of $23.8 million, or basically 1.9% of our total multifamily portfolio. Any questions?
I do. This is George. You mentioned, and the memo mentions that 54 loans dropped from foreclosure. Is that because they refinance? Is that because they declare bankruptcy? Is that because
Commissioner, that's a year-over-year count, and a lot of that is foreclosures being completed. The overall count was much higher. It has been declining steadily for the last 4 years, so that year-over-year count has also been declining. We're just having fewer loans going through the pipeline for foreclosure.
But again, numbers, the same as words, have meaning. So you're saying it's more because the foreclosures are being completed? Correct. Okay. One of the things we're finding out that the mortgage association has pointed out in CHFA, FHA, or like I like to call them, frick and frack, Fannie and Jenny, finding out is that even though the overall forbearance numbers are going down, and even though the numbers appear to be getting better, the demographics matter, because people who have mortgages who are from communities of color have been impacted much more heavily, and they tend to come from more lower income areas. Do we have demographics of our portfolio that we should look at and see if our portfolio is behaving a particular way? You know, because even if our foreclosure and forbearance are down, if there's any particular demographics that is higher than normal, we may want to consider doing something to try to address that, right, before it becomes an issue. And what we're seeing in the industry as a whole is that is happening. For whatever reason, is because they tend to be more in the jobs that COVID impacts more directly, because they don't have the cushion that other people have, whatever the reason may be, you know.
Mhm. Yes, we do have that demographic information, and we can certainly look at that.
I think it would be a worthwhile exercise, because if nothing else, it will confirm we don't have a problem, or we don't think we have a problem, but it's good to keep an eye on it, you know?
Mhm.
Because we are seeing that in as we do examinations of, you know, the provisions for loan losses.
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions for John? The next report is investment and swap report, Ed Miskowski.
Good morning. You have in your package the investment report for the third quarter of 2020. The investment report reflects an increase in investments of about $173 million from June 30th to a total of $3.39 billion. The increase is mainly due to accumulation of funds to pay November debt service and an increase in prepayments. Quarter over quarter, the weighted yield to maturity for the investment portfolio went down to 2.11% from 2.31% due to a decrease in short-term rates. You also have in your package a report on the authority swap portfolio. The swaps are used to hedge variable rate bonds to generate a synthetic fixed rate bond that has a lower cost to the authority than a traditional fixed rate bond. The swap report shows a hedging position of 40 swaps with 9 counterparties, totaling $1 billion notional amount. The outstanding notional is $30 million higher than last quarter due to a new swap entered into in August that hedged the 220 Series C variable rate bonds that were issued on August 13th. The number of swap counterparties remained the same. The weighted pay rate by the authority went down to 3.079% from 3.135%, and the mark-to-market value increased slightly to a negative 213.7 million from a negative 219.8 million. The weighted pay rate gives an indication of the weighted average rate the authority pays on the outstanding notional of the swaps. Does anyone have any questions? Jerry?
I have a question. I remember from that capital adequacy report we all saw, they were recommending that we put on swaps on unhedged variable rate. We thought it was a good time to do so. Is there a plan to do that? Or do you still think there's a value to having some unhedged?
Well, there is a natural balance sheet hedge here on the unhedged. While we use swaps to directly hedge some variable rate bonds, there's also a natural balance sheet hedge because we have to maintain quite a bit of short-term rates, short-term investments in the SNF to satisfy the investment policy. So these short-term investments will somewhat hedge some of the unhedged swaps. And there's also, as you mentioned, staff is looking at putting out some swaps on part of the unhedged bond portfolio.
Any questions for Ed? Next report is the Finance Audit Monthly Tracking Report. Sherry Lambert.
Morning. This month in multifamily, there is Mapleview Towers in Stamford. This is a almost $25 million project. It's a acquisition and rehab of an existing building. It is a Section 8 project-based building in Stamford. And in the home ownership area, as Allison mentioned, there was 128 first mortgage loans and 49 DAP loans. It's about 38% of our loans in September were included a DAP loan. And the prepayments are up to 302 this month for first mortgage and 104 DAP first mortgage prepayments. Any questions?
If there's no questions from Sherry, our next item is the minutes of the Finance Audit Committee meeting September 24th, 2020. And I have a motion to accept those minutes.
It's Tim, moved.
Second,
I'll second.
discussion? Do we need a roll call for the minutes?
We do. Jerry Abrahams,
Yes.
Tim Hodges,
Yes.
Kathy McKinnon,
Yes.
George Perez,
Yes.
and Sarah Sanders.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Just so you know, Gwendolyn Thames, I joined
Gwen.
late, but I'm on. I put it in the chat to Amy.
Oh, you did?
Let her know.
Sorry about that. I didn't even see it. Okay.
There's nothing further. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
It's Tim, moved.
Second, George.
I don't think, do we need a roll call for adjournment?
No.
No.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.